Hello, my name is Jake Damari and I'm Vice President of Marketing and Sales at XCentium, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. There are nearly 1 billion potential customers in the People's Republic of China connected to the internet, making it the country with the largest online community and a very lucrative e-commerce market to sell into. However, establishing an online business behind the Great Firewall includes many challenges related to digital strategy, regulation, and technology. Last year, Dave Stawinski, VP of Client Services at Excentium and our presenter today, helped our client Tech.com create the first Sitecore B2B commerce site ever deployed on Mooncake. This year, we're well on our way to completing our next project with another client entering the market, and we'd like to share the things we've learned along the way. During this online event, we'll cover lessons learned regarding digital strategy, regulation, and the differences between Azure's global cloud and Mooncake. Audiences considering an entry to this increasingly attractive market will come away better prepared to succeed in their endeavors. After the presentation, we'll have time for questions, so please enter them using the GoToWebinar interface. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Dave Stawinski.
Hello, everyone. As Jake said, my name is Dave Stawinski. I am VP Client Services for Excentium, and I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon, and not the beautiful Shanghai skyline that you can see on your screen. But doesn't that just look like a place to go and do some business?
Looks
it sure does
very
to me,
exciting,
doesn't it? So I'm going to just dive right in here. We're here today to talk about leaping over the Great Firewall. So this is going to be kind of a 101 course in how to get going digitally in China, focused particularly on Sitecore, but and on Azure. But I think along the way, you'll see that it's kind of technology agnostic too. And we're going to talk about regulations. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. We are basically here to help y'all, business and technical decision makers. We want to make sure that you have the knowledge that you need to succeed. Of course, just seeing this webinar today is an introduction, and our hope is that the conversation can continue. And we would love to be partners to you to help you, realize your dreams over there. We'd love to be friends. And if you don't see something that you're hoping to see today, you can get in touch with us. I'm sure Jake can help facilitate that too, but we're going to send this deck out and it's got my contact information in it. I'm also going to just take maybe 5 minutes to tell you, who Excentium is. If you've never heard of us before, we are a full service digital consultancy, and we are Sitecore Platinum level partners. We do, we build websites and write software for clients all over the world, but that's just the beginning of what we do. You can see that we have a presence all over the United States. We also have some presence overseas as well to help us follow the sun, and just to, you can see there that we have this senior delivery consultant model, so we try to find the best talent no matter where they are. So if you're in the United States, or if you're in Europe, or if you're in Asia, we want to talk to you, especially if you are excited about Sitecore, excited about technology delivery. We have sort of 3 bucketed offerings. Jake is really the master at talking about this, but I'll give it a go. We have our digital practice, which includes sort of all of the customer experience and strategy offering. That's where we have our creatives, our user experience designers, digital marketing people, everyone that helps bring digital to people, to real people. Content and commerce, which includes the Sitecore practice, the commerce practice, various other things, but really I think what we're known for, and certainly what I think this audience has come to hear about, would fall under that. And then we have our cloud practice. We do cloud hosting and managed services focused basically, or primarily I should say, on Sitecore running on Azure, but we do lots of other stuff too, and we have our Salesforce practices within that. So if you have Salesforce needs, don't forget about Excentium for that as well. Just a logo quilt, a few of our recent clients. You can see there's some really well-known brands here. There's also some really large footprint global corporations here. 2 of these are clients of ours that have begun to do business or are well established in doing business in China, and we have helped them with that. Sometimes I can't name the names, sometimes I can, just FYI. Sitecore excellence. So we are very committed Sitecore partners. We're platinum implementation partners, like you can see. We've got badges for a few different of their offerings. We have many MVPs over the years. We've won awards from Sitecore for the work that we've done with them. And of course, what we're here to talk about today, we did put the first Sitecore site in mainland China's cloud. So the first Sitecore site on Azure in China, which is actually called Mooncake over there, that's the brand name of it. We built that with, for one of our client partners. Very proud moment for us. That's a picture of me up there in the corner in the northwest. But you can see we have a kind of nice web of Sitecore leadership across the country. So no matter where you are, you can definitely find us, and I'm sure Jake can help with that as well. So let's get down to basics. Let's get into the serious business of doing business in China. So where is China? It's obviously kind of tongue in cheek, but I want to point out one little factoid that I think sort of sets the tone. China is a challenge. I think of it as being a frontier. There's kind of more than one China that you can do business with in a way, and so we have to be mindful of these things, and we're going to try to help you with that. One thing that I learned right off the bat, about maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I did a PowerPoint sort of like this one, where I had a big silhouette of the map of China in it because I thought it had visual impact, and I forgot to include Taiwan. We always must include Taiwan when we show visual representations of China. It can be considered insulting not to, and that's just kind of sort of setting the stage. I think that in terms of the challenges, there are regulatory realities that you cannot ignore, but you also have to give the customers there a great experience. They expect it more and more on a par and even leading digital experiences globally. We're going to talk more about WeChat. We're going to talk more about personalization in China, but you have to be on your toes with the Chinese consumer. They are exceptionally savvy consumers, and they have, as I say here, their options are increasing all the time. So you need to really balance these things, and this is something that we can help with. A little bit about just sort of the basics. If you're thinking about doing business in China and you've come here today to listen to this, it would really make sense if you already are on Sitecore somewhere or planning to be, already have some experience with Azure, which is called Mooncake in China. And then there's some optionals here too. We're going to talk a lot more about WeChat. There are specific web analytics and CDN and AWS and other factors to consider when you're putting together a stack for China. And we're going to talk through more of those. WeChat is definitely something that you need to know about. It is one of the world's largest application platforms, and it is the largest in China, with the most payments processed of any payment system in China. 900 million users of just their payment system, and over 1 billion on WeChat. That's a lot of people, a lot of users. And we will get more into the specifics of that. I'm going to go as deep as I think someone needs to go to know the basics. And I would just say at the very outset that if you have questions, or if there are specific topics that you want to get into more detail about, I am absolutely happy to have those conversations with you. You can reach out to me. We can set up a one-on-one. But that said, we're going to talk about how you need to limit liability and maximize business value. And when I say not losing too much sleep, I'm half kidding there. Expect to do more business at night, because it is right now, it's tomorrow evening there. And the evening of the West Coast of the United States, it's going to be tomorrow morning there. So most meetings that you'll have with folks there will be early for them and late for you. Okay, so first we're going to talk about ICP, Internet Content Provider Licenses. In order to do anything on the web in China with a presence on mainland China, you have to have ICP. There are, and I put a little picture of it. This is actually inside this red circle. Every web page of your site will have this usually in the footer. You'll see an ICP number that's registered with the government. If you don't have it, you should expect for them to find you and probably shut you off. There are two types, commercial and non-commercial. If you plan to generate any kind of income from a website, that's obviously e-commerce, but also in many cases advertising, but really anything that supports payments, this is a no-brainer. If it doesn't support payments, it still may be considered commercial. So, lead generation, et cetera. These are things for lawyers to help you figure out. But there are also non-commercial licenses. They're called BAN or ICP filings instead of licenses. That means if you're really, really certain that you won't be generating any revenue from the website, if it's purely informational, then you're safe to do the non-commercial. There's pricing differences. The amount of time that it takes to get them, the process to go through is different. And that's something that if you want to have a website that runs in mainland China, you need to be thinking about this prior to really doing anything else. I've seen the process take 6 weeks, but that was for someone that already had ICP for a different property. I think that it's a 90-day out kind of a thing, at least, I would think. If you be forward thinking and start that process as soon as possible, you do need to have a presence in China. You'll have to actually have people over there to help shepherd you through this process. And we can talk more about that in depth if you like. I get this question a lot, near China CDN. So if you want to get around needing ICP, if you want to get around meeting a lot of these regulatory strictures, it is conceivable that you can use near China CDN, which is content delivery networks in Southeast Asia and nearby offshore China to serve content to people on mainland China, because they have a POP presence that goes through to China. There are definitely really serious concerns about doing that if you have any commercial interest. You should expect performance degradation, and you also have to think about the fact that regulations can shift and change under your feet, and what you're doing today may no longer be in compliance tomorrow. So this is definitely, where I said it's kind of a frontier. This is maybe kind of more of like the gold rush mentality, and I think it's something that should be very, very seriously considered before those steps are taken. For most of our clients, and I wouldn't think that it would really be an option, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. Personal data. So now we're getting into the specific regulations now. The Personal Information Protection Law of the People's Republic of China is one of 2 major data laws that you'll become familiar with. We'll talk about the other in a moment. You can think of this as being very similar to GDPR from the European Union. There are some differences. It calls for personal information officers to be, available with your company. That officer would be responsible for running an initial risk assessment and working with the Chinese government to provide that, doing regular compliance audits that also have to be submitted. There are rules for doing business with entities outside of China. So if you, for example, want to sell advertising space to an extra Chinese entity, for ads that will run in China for, say, like, I don't know, a European sunglasses brand or something like that, there are rules that you need to follow for that. And this is not something that you'll probably have to worry about, but it gets very, very hairy around criminal proceedings. So if you have to provide personal data, or if, say, the United States requests evidentiary data from you from someone in China, which, obviously that's an unusual situation, but that's where things become quite contentious, and you would want to engage legal counsel before you took any steps around complying with any kind of subpoenas and that kind of stuff. Again, this is not yet law. It used to be called, quote unquote, the specification, kind of colloquially, but it's becoming closer and closer to being a law. And the next law that we're going to talk about has been now ratified. So sort of everyone thinks this is next. So don't sleep on this. We say compliance is forward thinking. We like our clients and we ourselves to be forward thinking. So when I work with partners in this regard, I counsel them to consider the fact that this, just treat it like it's law already and stay out of trouble. Data security. So this is that other law, the other big one. Data security law of the People's Republic of China. It has been ratified and becomes enforceable on September 1st. So we're about just over a month out from this becoming, it's kind of a big milestone for this becoming an enforceable law. It's not just for data processing inside of China, but also anything outside of China that they consider to meet certain very broad characteristics. So it's best to be cautious. We don't really know what the impact exactly is going to be of it yet. It is pretty far-reaching. The writing of it is pretty loose, so it depends on how strictly it's enforced. Now, in the past with other internet regulations, it's kind of a patchwork. So again, enforceability or enforcement. So again, be forward thinking. Assume that you need to comply with the letter of the law, not just the spirit of the law, and you'll probably be safe. Again, I'm not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice, just my experience. So for example, just an example of why they say this is loosely written. They say entities that handle important data. But the law doesn't actually say what important data is. So it kind of leaves it up to you to decide what's important, which means that you should be as cautious really as you can. What this means for Sitecore customers is that we do not recommend hosting your CM outside of China. One of the questions that I get a lot is, can I have a CM in the United States and my CDs, my content management server in the United States where my people can manage the content, have CDs, content delivery servers inside the firewall, and deliver content through the firewall that way. Technically, that used to be feasible, but as of September 1, we definitely don't recommend it anymore because that would violate the new data security law, as we understand it. So then the other thing to think about is the future. Definitely, you're going to have this. You very well may have this personal information officer, and your legal team have these folks monitor the legal situation, monitor regulatory updates, and generally just as if you would in the United States, you need to know the legal landscape. It's the same, but changes are a bit more fluid. Enforcement is a bit more fluid. Everything's a bit more fluid. So be ready to be nimble and have contingencies. If you stick to the letter of the law, you'll be much more likely to have smooth sailing. But it's always good to have contingencies, and we can help you develop those too. Okay, I'm going to talk for a moment, and this is going to be quite broad, about some of the things around technical approaches. So again, Azure in China is called Mooncake. It is not exactly like Azure or the Azure that we know from the rest of the world. There are some unknowns around it, and there are some things that we know about it from experience that make it a bit different. The most important thing to know about it is that there are limited numbers of Azure Mooncake licensed partners, so limited providers. The one that we work with is called 21 Vianet. When we first began working in China, they were the only one. And our experience with 21 Vianet has been pretty positive. We've been able to build, pretty modern table stakes kind of stuff with it. So, CI/CD with zero downtime, integration with Cloudflare. That's a CDN that we find to be very, actually, both of the partners that we have, clients that we have that are doing business in China are using Cloudflare Enterprise. Being able to publish from one location, Solar indexing using containers, which it would be, at least a couple of years ago, that would have been pretty innovative here in the United States, and we were able to do it over there. And then, some of the things that everyone expects. So, auto scaling and performance monitoring with, Azure Dev Insights and things like that. So we are going to talk a little bit though about some of the differences. And this is a big scary diagram. One thing I really wanted to point out here is how similar, doing business digitally in China can be. Again, this is a Sitecore focused reference, but you could think of this really in any case. On one side, we have the U.S. enterprise and sort of what it's composed of and the effort that it takes to keep it going. You have people that are building a website, you have your infrastructure, you have your Sitecore solution with your content and asset management happening. You have it integrated with legacy services, et cetera. To prepare that to run in China with parity, you really only need to make sure you have a consistent user experience, which will require some design changes, obviously some content changes because you'll be putting it out there in Mandarin. And of course, the content will be probably very different because what the market cares about in China is different. But in terms of the front end and the presentation layer, there can be very close to parity, especially if you have set out from the outset to design a site that can accommodate both. They don't have to be very different. The one big difference is that you pretty much have to rewrite your front end for WeChat. The great thing is that Sitecore JS and probably other methods now can allow you to manage your WeChat mini program content from Sitecore, but the front end of WeChat is built with WeChat code using WeChat tools and is hosted and tested by with WeChat tools. So that does need to be rebuilt. I want to talk more about WeChat in a moment. It's extraordinarily important, but we will get there. But as you can see, other than that, it's pretty similar. So the level of effort to move from what you already have in the United States to what you envision or are ambitious of having in China, it doesn't have to be very daunting in terms of the LOE. Talk a little bit about personalization. So this is an interesting fact, according to McKinsey. So by 2025, 40% of the luxury goods that the world consumes will be consumed by Chinese consumers. That is, I found that staggering. And that doesn't just mean underpants. That means, I think a lot of people who do business in China know that China was one of the early adopter, or not early, I shouldn't say that, but one of the most earliest adopted luxury goods that became popular in China was red wine. And this goes all the way back to the mid 2000s, I guess. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The Chinese consumer has a big appetite for luxury goods and for the feeling of luxury and the digital experience that kind of feels luxurious. Personalization is a big part of that. So speaking directly to my desires, just like we do for global consumers everywhere else, but in some respects it's even more important in China because of use patterns that come out of heavy use of WeChat, which is a very, very personalized platform. So the table stakes are a bit higher there. The expectation is that wherever something can be personalized, it will be. We can talk more about personalization, but generally we find that it takes two basic forms, active and passive. So active is ask a person what they're interested in and they tell you, maybe like on a splash page on your homepage, or what are you here to do today? But that's not really always possible for every kind of business. Some businesses, there would be too many answers to that, or it's too complex. So passive, which is what Sitecore really excels at, and what we have a lot of consultants that can help you with, which is letting your website use predictive methods to determine, based on a specific user's path, what they are most likely to want to see, what they are most likely to want to interact with. I think everybody on this call probably is familiar with that. Web analytics, obviously important. Can I use Google Analytics? This is an interesting question. So this is probably the one exception to obeying the quote unquote, the letter of the law, even though it's not really, in this case, really a law, that we might make. Google Analytics isn't supposed to work in China, and mileage may vary. Let's put it that way. So there's a diagram here that you can take a look at when you get the deck. This is just very basic approach, but it is possible to continue to use your Google Analytics to some degree in a kind of basic way in China. Definitely, there are features of Google that are available now. Some of the stuff that's come out in the past couple of years, especially, that you won't be able to use there. But if you are looking for some baseline KPIs, things like that, at least for today, you should be able to do it technically. Now there's more than one option though. So the quote unquote Google of China is Baidu. They are, that's kind of how I think of them anyway, and I think a lot of people do. Big data company in China. They offer web analytics that you can also use. It's a pretty robust platform, and it is completely compliant with Chinese law and regulation. So you're of course safe to try that as well. The difference, of course, is going to be about level of effort and who can do what with the data. So if you are primarily North American consumers of the analytics data, getting your head around what you're getting out of Baidu is going to be an unfamiliar situation, and Google Analytics might be the way for you to go, at least now. For WeChat, we do have some experience making Google Google Analytics work with WeChat applications too, WeChat mini programs, I should say. WeChat as a platform also has its own analytics, which are can be very useful as well. We're not going to get too technically into WeChat today, but it's obviously a really important thing to think about. Okay, advanced studies in wall leaping. So I wanted to give you some, these are kind of more anecdotes, but things that we've seen that when you take them together, and these are just some examples, some of the many, that kind of help paint a picture for why you need to really be vigilant and nimble when you're doing business in China. The watchword here is assume nothing. Anything, especially that runs in the cloud, the regulations are very fluid, and so companies like Cloudflare, like AWS, they are very carefully watching what they can and can't do and acting accordingly. And it's not always well documented, so you need to be very, very cautious about what you expect to be able to do. Certain things like landing zones, control towers that that AWS users have grown fond of, you don't get those in China. So you should expect more customization, more overhead, more what I call hand holding. Oh my goodness, all of a sudden these services are blocked one day for no apparent reason. That kind of stuff becomes daily bread. It doesn't have to be extremely difficult. You just need to be ready for it. Some of the specific things that we've seen, so anything around images or video seem to be particularly in the crosshairs of regulators. For example, we were not allowed to have programmatic resizing of images, no manipulation of images in between the server and the user. So some Cloudflare workers that you get out of the box, some scripts that they offer, got shut off in China. So we had to go build our own to keep the customer experience at parity with what it had been before that. Otherwise, people on mobile devices would get giant screen-filling images of products that didn't fit inside the UI. Little things like that. Amazon Elastic Transcoder, so being able to transcode to different video formats on the fly. Very, very uneven support. We've had to do lots of little patching here and there to make that happen. So what does that mean? Thorough testing is critical. We have seen some really strange cases where, for example, that image resizing thing for Cloudflare, there were some mobile users in mainland China who didn't see a problem. So that just demonstrates that, especially, we're going to talk more about CDNs, or maybe we already had, but we'll talk about CDNs. There are certain cases where if you're relying on a CDN, you will definitely see inconsistent end user results. And as far as the documentation, so some providers, Azure, Cloudflare, AWS, have great documentations, others don't. So really testing, thorough testing is really important. Connection speed issues, you can expect to see a lot of latency sometimes between North America or Europe and anything that's happening in China, even if VPN's not involved. You're going to want to work your way toward having some kind of technical presence in mainland China, so that you can have folks who can do things like manage your databases. This is going to change over time. If you don't already have a presence there, that's something that you're going to want to probably think about. There are partners in China that can help you out, partners like XCentium, but that are in mainland China that can help you there too. But again, do everything you can to be by the book. So support the letter, not just the spirit of the quote unquote law. Make sure you're just doing everything that you're supposed to. Don't cut corners. There's a little example. So with CAPTCHA, we didn't configure something properly for we made a mistake. And so certain API calls were returning CAPTCHA responses when CAPTCHA wasn't even thought to be involved in that route. So again, just little gotchas here and there. What about accessibility? China does have accessibility standards. They are not, at least as I am aware of and as of now, enforceable. So if you're starting from scratch in China, it isn't a necessity to be accessible. Of course, that's not Excentium's recommendation. We would never recommend that. So what we do recommend is we think, well, what level of compliance are you looking at here? Do you want to be, WCAG AA? Are you looking for, are you going to be screen reader compliant? All the things that you're doing in the United States. Unless you have a compelling reason not to do it, I would pretty much plan on doing the same for users in China. Number one, you don't know when the regulations could change, and they do have a specification that's developing, so that, that could be a couple of years out. But also, just in terms of CX and treating people, as well as you can online, definitely what we recommend. A little bit about business communications. I mentioned earlier that you should expect to be having some more meetings in the evening because our evening is there tomorrow morning. There, obviously is a time difference, but also a couple of other things. So when you're speaking to people who are, primarily Chinese speakers, don't assume that they understand anything that you're saying, and don't assume that you understand what they're saying unless you really feel that you are. People, some people are shy. Some people just don't have as good of English as others. Obviously, you may not speak great Chinese. So what I find is that when I'm in calls with business people in China, which is a nightly occurrence for me, we have to be very, very clear with each other. It feels almost like a little bit like UN diplomacy. Like, is this what you meant to say? Yes, that's what I meant to say. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing insulting or you shouldn't feel like you're being aggressive at all. I think everyone needs to understand each other because that way we save time and things are more efficient. I definitely recommend having regular touch bases, agile ceremonies, etc. Do things just like you would here. Have the same discipline that you would here. Try as much as you can. We're all getting more and more used to remote work nowadays, and that definitely goes for folks in China too. During COVID, everyone that I work with in Shanghai was working from home for about a year. So that's definitely something they're familiar with too. And another thing, GoToMeeting doesn't always work so well over there. Sorry, GoToMeeting. WebEx definitely seems to be fine. Teams seems to be fine. GoToMeeting is uneven. Talked about the map imagery. Oh yeah, I put my name in Chinese characters next to my email signature, just as a courtesy. I think it's a way to say that that I'm thinking about them. And I have a little funny story about it. When I first did it, I copy and pasted what someone had put next to my name in a communication that I received from them, and it turned out to be the wrong characters. What it actually was, they were the characters for guest, not for Dave. So what that actually says is those are the Chinese characters for Daifu, which is how someone in China would say Dave. I just think it's a nice thing to do. Also, a handy little Outlook feature that everybody who has Outlook has. You can put additional time zones next to your calendar. You can see CN on this little blue box that I've got to that graphic. I have that there all the time so that I always know. Obviously, it's tomorrow as well, but I always know what time it is there when I'm scheduling meetings. It's just a handy little thing to do so that you don't have to continuously try to figure out what time it is. It is also, it's kind of nice no matter where someone is in China, whatever city they're in. China only has one time zone, so that makes it a little easier. We did include in this deck our case study for Tektronix. This was that site that sort of seems like a flag on the moon for us. The first Azure Sitecore site in mainland China, and a wonderful partnership that we've had with Tektronix over the years. They were not available to be with us today, but they send their regards. They have a really full featured site. It has, in terms of the user experience, it has real parity with what they're doing in the United States. They really didn't omit any features or really change much other than the content and the language, obviously. And over time, of course, they diverge more. There are features that the Chinese consumer expects that like, for example, a WeChat app that they've had to make sure that they maintain as well. This will be part of the deck that we send. And I guess that's just about it for today. We have one final poll. just to see if we can do better. I know that a lot of this today was sort of just high level, but the goal was definitely to be more of a 101 course or a primer, and to stimulate curiosity and further conversation. So if you would like to find out more, I would love to set up a call with you and whoever from my team we can bring to bear to help you solve your problems too. I don't know, Jake, did you put this poll up yet?
Actually, thank you for the reminder. There it is. And we do have a few questions.
Oh,
Dave,
okay.
thanks for this presentation. This has been fantastic. So first question is WeChat the only payment processing option or the best because it's the most popular? And are we able to continue using the payment processing we use on our US and other international sites in China?
So I think that was 3 questions. Let me see if I can get them all. Yes, WeChat is, if not it's not the only option for accepting payments in China, but it is certainly the most well-known, the most used, and frankly, probably the easiest. They offer a very, very simple on-ramp to taking payments through a WeChat mini program. There's APIs to it. It has analytics. It's very, very, very simple to use, and 900 million people and counting are using it. That said, if you just don't want to do that, maybe you don't want to have, well, for whatever reason, there are other options. It is quite unlikely that you'll be able to take payment with your stateside payment processors for Chinese customers, although I suppose there may be exceptions to that. But I wouldn't count on that at all. And then there are also other options. Tencent, the Chinese company that created WeChat and runs WeChat, they have non-WeChat payment processing options, and there are others as well. So I hope that was all of them, all the questions.
Let's see, we got another one about WeChat. Could you share an example demonstrating how Sitecore and WeChat work together to personalize the user experience?
I definitely can. So I can't do that on the screen right now. That would be a great follow-up conversation, though. We would love to get together with you and show you just that. Please reach out to myself or Jake, or Jake, maybe you can explain how the follow-ups are supposed to work. But yeah, we'd love to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll be following up with everybody that attended today and try to find out what was sort of behind their reason for participating and see if there are any other questions we can answer. There is one last question. Can you talk a little bit more about how your other clients have handled language translation and localization? Is it necessary to have a native speaker on staff?
So 2 questions there again. Mandarin is the primary business language of China. Most consumers are used to doing business in it. English is also very widespread, but Mandarin, when we talk about Chinese language in terms of digital commerce and that sort of stuff, Mandarin is usually the language we're talking about. But you very well may have a business case where Cantonese or some other regional dialect could come into play. So you need to know that. And I'm sure that that's something that if you're doing business in China, you can sort that out. But as far as having a native Chinese speaker on staff, if you're going to be doing business over there and you're going to have a presence there that's going to be, responsive enough to be successful, I think that's just going to happen. You're going to have folks over there. Our clients certainly do. In fact, one of our clients has a larger presence there than they do here. So, but in terms of let's talk. You know what? Let me take a different angle on that question. Just in terms of Sitecore content, do I need to have a native Chinese speaker on staff as a content editor? You either need someone on staff or you need to hire an ISP, a language services provider, LSP, that has that as a competency, which they all do.
Yeah.
All the ones worth their salt do. So I think the simple answer to your question is yes. If you want to do business in China, knowing the language is going to be important.
Now, I know the last client that I worked with that had entered into an international market had run language all the content through a translation service, but then they had customer service people who, of course, would be answering the phones in the markets that they were moving into that did a pass on it to make sure that it came out right. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Let me
good
just say
idea.
one kind of, let me make like a blanket statement that I can almost like leave y'all with. There's over 1 billion people in China. There are, like I said, there's about 1 billion of them are on WeChat, and 900 million of them are using WeChat to make payments regularly. We have clients that are doing aggregately multiple billions of dollars a year's worth of business there. Um, it may kind of feel technically, and in terms of the level of effort of getting started there, it feels like a frontier. Regulatory situation is fluid. Your feet aren't wet there yet, but it is an exceptionally mature digital market, and
Mhm.
it should be treated as such. So yes, I think that's a good way to leave this.
Excellent. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. Dave, thank you for your expertise and time. And we will be sending out a recording of this event to everyone who participated. We'll also be posting the deck and sharing that with folks that participated today as well. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can reach us at dave.stawinski@excentium.com or info@excentium.com, or just go on over to our website and you can contact us through the Connect page. Thanks and have a great day.